Welcome back to Undercurrent. One of the most controversial stories we've showed earlier this year was the Row 8 protest, and here's why.
There has been extensive controversy not just over the construction of Row 8, but of the behaviour of police and protesters at the site. West TV have uncovered unseen footage from the Coolabah construction, which raises concerns about the continued presence of asbestos in the area and for the health and safety of police, protesters and workers alike. What is your involvement and interest in the Row 8 issue?
Well, my main focus has always been, since 1986, to document what actually goes on in our local community, and that is Bibra Lake itself. So I've got a lot of passion for the local fauna and local flora of the area, and I've also involved my grandchildren in taking photos and have an understanding that nature generally has solutions to issues. Because of the local understanding of the Row 8 and the fact that the Colin Barnett government has chosen to go ahead with this prior to an election just really rocks my soul. I think it's totally criminal that any government should actually proceed on a major issue unless they have an agreement with all major parties. So this to me is just one hell of a stunt.
So why have you called your videos public versus government?
Well, because the whole picture is all about going forward as far as the state's concerned. So there is an alternative plan. Not everybody understands all this. To actually rush this through the way it's been rushed means there's something definitely wrong behind this. Someone's financing this and making commercial decisions based on. It's a very poor decision-making situation in my book.
Can you tell us about the asbestos at the construction site and what you saw?
Look, I work in an area where asbestos has always been an issue. I won't say where I work. I can accentuate the fact that the NBN was shut down for quite a long period over the asbestos issue. The government rushed into that job also. Now this particular area around Bibra Lake, I've been aware of asbestos issues for quite some time. I'm not an asbestos expert. I wouldn't be able to differentiate between bad asbestos and good asbestos, I must admit, right? But filming the World War II army camp, it is blatantly obvious when you look at the video and you look at all the photos that people have taken that have embedded GPS locations in these photos, that this is asbestos. For some government organisation to say there is no asbestos in the area, that's just criminal. We all know that the asbestos has been churned up with the actual mulch, and at some stage you might end up getting free mulch.
And so who was and who wasn't wearing masks at the site, and why do you think that is?
Well, the only people that were pretty much wearing asbestos masks at the time would have been a lot of the protesters, I would have thought. So those people that were in close proximity to the actual machinery that was churning up the dust and the dirt, the police, the security personnel, the contractors, nobody was wearing asbestos masks.
And so I could see from your videos you had a strong opposition to the felling of some of the historically old trees.
I see a huge issue due to the fact that decision making is complex, that this has not been done correctly. This is a willy-nilly project. How is it possible that one government wants to do one thing and then the other government wants to do the other thing, yet the money that's financing this comes out of us people?
The EPA, our Supreme Court, December 2015, when we won the Supreme Court action there, it was clear that the EPA had gone against their own guidelines, which said you cannot use offsets for a wetlands that is significant of this, and this has been recognised by, there was more submissions to the EPA on this project than there has been in any other WA project. So that just shows you the depth of knowledge by a huge amount of professors and people who are experts in this area saying this land is too precious, it's too vital in the ecosystem. So we know that, for one, that they should never have signed off on this because of that. Internationally, if you've got congestion problems, you don't build more highways. That's the 1950s thought. That's when, Los Angeles was building major freeways. They are now taking these freeways down. They know if you need to solve congestion, you put the money into public transport. Imagine what Perth could be like with $2 billion in public transport. It would just be absolutely fantastic. It would set us up for years. People could really enjoy that transport to their work or to wherever they need, leaving the roads free for those businesses that need to use, trucks to get to a business, or their tradies or whatever. We get rid of, a lot of that congestion. If it's about freight, the Kwinana port has had bipartisan support for many, many years. We know that a port similar to what is being planned has already received environmental approval. We know that there's no seagrass in that area. In fact, it's a working port at the moment. 80% of our wheat is actually exported from that area. So we've already got a port there. We're just expanding on it. If it's about privatising the Fremantle port, you don't spend $2 billion for 13 kilometres of a road that doesn't even reach the port just to then go and privatise the port. You know, there's no logic to it.
This video demonstrates the environmental risk mitigation measures that main roads will undertake to minimise the impact of Row 8 on the surrounding environment. The road will now follow the existing partly cleared Western Power corridor through the most sensitive areas between Bibra Drive and Progress Drive. Significant planning has gone into ensuring impacts of Row 8 on the surrounding environment, including the Belia wetlands, is kept to a minimum. A top-down bridge construction approach will be implemented over part of the Row Swamp wetland to minimise the clearing footprint and to maintain ecological connectivity. A bioretention basin will capture, filter and treat road and stormwater runoff, and native species will be planted on road embankments and at other locations. Recreation in the area will be enhanced by the creation of separated pathways for pedestrians and cyclists, and underpasses to maintain connectivity, improving safety and access.
Every expert that we've talked to has said this is wrong. So on so many grounds it's wrong. It goes against our community, there's no consultation, the money is wasted. They started bulldozing just a few days before Christmas, so right in front of people's homes. It just absolutely traumatised those people in Coorbalup, and then they found out there was asbestos dust going over their homes. So for those families that have children, they're in a huge amount of pain about this. The people that keep coming to the wetlands and seeing this destruction of 200, 300-year-old trees. We know there's 500-year-old trees, the harm. This is an Aboriginal sacred site here. This heritage site is older than the pyramids, and yet we're allowing it to be bulldozed.
We're talking a lot of police policing something that shouldn't be policed. Passions are running high at times, and the security people in particular and the police have got a job to do. I guess it's just the way it goes.
Well, for the last 2.5 years, working very hard to make sure that people are actually engaged in what's happening.
The Organisation of African Communities have developed a new program. This new program trains youth as an initiative and youth leaders to use their energy towards lasting peace. Angela Albuquerque with this inspirational story.
Stop killing each other, start caring for one another, stop looking in the mirror and pretend nothing is wrong.
I felt we should take the initiative to bring people together, to strategize, to identify and help reduce violence in the community.
I think this is the first time an organization have come together to put a project on how they could empower the young African people in Western Australia.
The Stop the Violence project is very important, not just to the Organization of African Communities, but it's also very important in the lives of our young Africans, those who are growing up, and it is important that we imbibe the culture of good societal values in them, instill discipline in them, instill focus in the lives of our young Africans so that they can live a meaningful life and contribute positively to the development of the society in which they live. That is why Stop the Violence is a project that is targeting young Africans to ensure that they imbibe leadership skills to help them not just in their life but also to contribute positively to the community in which they live.
Because of the cultural difference coming into Australia, there's a lot of violence, I think, in families between the young and the old generation, because there is a gap there. It's harder for our younger generation because there's a cultural shock and a cultural difference there, and there's not enough people standing up and actually leading. We need the youth to come together and actually drive it.
Young people need to be busy. They need to be kept busy. And that's something since I've been injured, I was able to do, get 40, 50 of them together. We play games every Wednesday and Friday. And I'm lucky to have the OAC here because they're the one been supporting me with, with equipment. I can't afford it myself, and I'm volunteering for this. And that's something I want to see happen, like violence among our African youth in general. We want to keep that as low as possible. The only way to do it is to get them involved in sport, music, any activity as much as possible, get them busy. That's the only way. If a lot of young people are sitting around bored at home, of course they're going to grab a couple of mates and go around and do silly stuff, which amounts to a lot of trouble, people end up getting hurt.
Stop the Violence Project is an initiation of an organization of African communities. We need to go to the genesis of what actually causes violence. One is identity. We've got issues with finance, we've got issues with the trauma, we've got issues the people trying to fit in, we've got youth trying to transition from their ways of life back in Africa onto the Australian way of life.
One of the key things I always say to any youth in Western Australia, regardless of your ethnicity or your color, you have to be responsible for your own deeds. You have to be responsible for your community. You need to strengthen your community because you can't stand by yourself. You need people. If we have a lot of people in our community that are well educated and really willing to help their community, I'm sure we could have a better Australia.
We will be working with schools that have been identified. We will be working with a gathering of young Africans. We'll be organizing a couple of sporting events and a couple of different events to attract the young people. Our aim is to produce young advocates, young Africans that will serve as leaders in their own local community and speaking against violence. Our objective is also to make sure that every young African feels responsible for what they do, and we want to make sure to encourage them and give them that understanding that it is their responsibility to be a good citizen. It doesn't have to be the police, it has to be everybody, it has to be something collective.
Stop the Violence aims at getting the youths and training them as an instrument to use to stop the violence, getting them at a young age and training them what leadership means, and training them what self-confidence means, and training them what respect means, and training them how to engage in meaningful discussion instead of turning it into violence. So that's what Stop the Violence is all about.
Stop killing each other, start caring for one another. Stop looking in the mirror and pretend nothing is wrong.
That's all we have time for on Undercurrent today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.